Hello, and welcome to the Dartarian Show. I'm Alexander Dartarian,
And I'm Dominic Sykes.
and today we're talking about one of the worst nuclear disasters in history, Chernobyl. We're going to discuss the events of the disaster as well as the after effects of it, and what could have been done to prevent it.
Yep, so it should be a pretty exciting episode. It's going to be a two-parter, I think, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It's a huge event in history.
So the timeline is this part where we're going to talk about the timeline of the events, how basically it played out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the next episode, I think we're going to do, like, years later, like what we're looking at, like, a long time ago.
Yeah. So what I'm not 100% familiar with Chernobyl. I know there was a TV show, and I know that was a huge nuclear disaster. I know that there was one in America called the 3 Mile Island, and that I don't think that was as bad. And I know
there was Fukushima.
Yeah, Fukushima is the most recent one, but Chernobyl was in the 70s, 80s,
80s.
80s. Okay.
Yeah, about 80. It's 86.
Okay. Well, go ahead, Dom, and let us know what happened at Chernobyl.
All right. So, September 26th, 1977, the Chernobyl nuclear power station begins powering the grids.
Okay.
February 1986, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is a good few years later.
Yeah, 11 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Or 9 years later.
Soviet Union official is quoted saying the odds of a nuclear meltdown are 1 in 10,000 years, which, as we know, is not the case, obviously. No. The Chernobyl site contains 4 1,000 megawatt reactors plus 2 additional reactors that are under construction at this time in February of 1986.
Okay.
So, they are quoted saying that a nuclear meltdown, in February of that year is like 1 in a 1,000 or 10,000 chance of like happening.
He's like, you have a better chance of winning the lottery, basically.
Unfortunately, the stage has already been set for a meltdown by the safety test.
Oh, Lord.
So, April 25th, this is the important day, 1986 at 1 a.m., in preparation for the safety test, which they have timed to coincide with routine maintenance, which is the whole point. The test is supposed to determine the plant's still spinning turbines can produce enough electricity to keep the pumps running during the brief gap for emergency generators to kick in the event of a power failure. So basically, they want to make sure that if power goes out, that this shit will continue to run.
Doesn't the plant produce power, though? So how could the power go out?
I mean, you have to produce power to...
Yeah, but that's what the nuclear reactors are for.
I'm not sure how it works. I'm not a physicist. Maybe we can get a physicist and we can interview him on part 2. But right now, I'm just getting the basics. So yeah, basically that they wanted to make sure that it would still continue to run in the event of a power failure. But the safety test is ultimately what brings about the destruction of it. Okay. So same day, April 25th in 1986 at 2 a.m. So now it's just an hour later. To keep reactor number 4's emergency cooling system from interacting with the test, it is disabled. And although this doesn't cause the accident, it does worsen it. The test...
I'm pretty sure you need the coolers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The test and shutdown are temporarily delayed to accommodate the region's power needs around the same time. So it's pushed back a little bit.
Yeah. Wait, they've already deactivated the cooling?
For reactor number 4.
Okay. But and then they postponed it.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they just turn the cooler back on?
I don't know. You'll see.
Okay.
You'll see here what exactly what happened. But so again, April 25th, but this time around 11:10 p.m., operators are given the go ahead to continue with the test and shut down. Unfortunately, at this time, the less experienced night shift is on the job, although they never received proper instructions on how to complete the test properly.
Are you freaking kidding me?
Yeah. So these guys have no idea how to perform this.
Oh, by the way, we're going to do a dangerous test.
Uh-huh.
So, you guys got it, right?
Yep.
And there was like, how do you finish it?
Exactly. It is important to note that the safety director, the person in charge of this entire safety operation thing here, did not show up to help perform the test, as he felt that it was so routine that he wasn't needed.
No, for God's sakes.
Which I find absolutely ridiculous, as even if you don't find safety necessary, in your opinion, it still needs to be done. And OSHA would have had an absolute fit if it happened here, you know?
Yeah, but I don't think Russia has, or Ukraine. I think it's Ukraine at this time, but under the Soviet Union. But, like, I don't think they had, like, the same safety measures as we do now. I don't even think we did.
Well, you know how people are. You know, every job you ever go to, you're forced to sit down and watch these like training videos with safety and everything else, and everybody does the same thing. Yeah, I know that. But then they get on the job, right, and they start looking for loopholes and shortcuts to take and everything else to make the job easier, but ultimately less safe. You know.
Yeah, but I bet you in like the Soviet Union's like, yeah, nothing will happen.
Yeah, pretty much. So at 12:28 a.m. of the 26th of April, which is the very beginning of the next day, when power plummets too far below the level at which the reactor is considered stable, the operators respond by removing most of the control rods, which is in violation of the plant safety guidelines.
Jesus Christ.
They still have trouble raising the power, which is in part due to xenon buildup in the core. Xenon being the most powerful known neutron poison and officially known as Xenon-135. Again, that's just the technical stuff. I'm not
like I said,
schooled in how that works, but
I know a person that we're going to interview, but it won't be in the next episode, though. It'll be a little later
down the road.
In May.
All right. So obviously, you know, they're already screwing up.
Mm-hmm.
They got the night shift, which doesn't know what they're doing. And they're removing stuff they shouldn't be removing, and it's just a mess. Turning stuff off that shouldn't be turned off. At 1 a.m., even though the power stabilizes, it is at a lower than preferred level. Despite knowing that, the plant supervisors order the test to continue. The automatic emergency shutdown system and all other safety features are turned off.
This is like a worst case scenario. This is like
everything under the sun that could go wrong is going wrong.
This is a movie. This is like a Roland Emmerich movie.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm starting to see why it happened. I mean, at this point, they were kind of asking for it. I mean, I know it's messed up and a lot of people died because of it, but I mean, they didn't follow any of the correct procedures.
Yeah, it's 100% their fault.
At 1:23 and 4 seconds a.m., the test officially begins, and an unexpected power surge occurs. Although I'd say it probably should have been expected.
Yeah.
At 1:24 a.m., an operator presses the emergency shutdown button, but of course the control rods jam as they enter the core. All right. And now this is where it starts getting crazy. At 1:23 in the morning, at 1:23:58 seconds to be exact, the first explosion followed very quickly by at least one more, blows the 1,000-ton roof right off of the reactor.
God.
It also shoots a fireball up into the sky as the air fills with dust and graphite chunks. A blackout occurs in the plant, and radiation begins spewing out of the walls and equipment collapses. Dozens of smaller fires start up, as well as one on top of the neighboring reactor. Right?
Mm-hmm.
The nuclear engineer in charge of the test insists that reactor number 4 is still intact despite all evidence to the contrary. So he's continuing to say,
he's in 100% denial.
Yeah, no, you guys, this couldn't have happened. It's not possible. Yeah. You're just seeing shit, basically.
Like he just looks out the window. It's not there. No, it's there.
He just refused to believe it. Either he was way too confident and he was smarter than everybody who was telling him different, or he, like you said, was just in denial. He wanted to save his own ass. He's like, no, this couldn't happen. This couldn't my career's on the line here. What am I going to do, you know?
Yeah.
In an ironic twist, he later dies of radiation poisoning. Which, you know, after all of the denying and the trying to cover up, I find a strange sense of karma in the fact that it, you know,
Yeah,
the effects of what he.
Unfortunately, his incompetence probably cost a lot of people. Yeah.
At 1:28 a.m., having no knowledge of radiation and no protective clothing, the first firefighters arrive at the scene. So these guys have no idea what they're going into. Not a clue. All they know is that they're going in to put out a fire.
I mean, this is the 80s. This is like the 50s, man. I think people knew about radiation poisoning.
Yeah.
And like the reactions. Because like I remember in the 50s when they were doing all those nuclear tests, they would have like soldiers like 150
But
feet away.
you have to remember, they're still being told that, no, everything is fine.
Oh, the core's still intact.
Yeah, the core is still intact. You know, they don't know that there's any radiation. As far as from what they've been told, all they're going to do is go put out a fire.
Okay.
At 2:15 a.m., at an emergency meeting, local Soviet officials decide to block cars from entering or exiting Pripyat, which is the surrounding city where the workers and stuff are housed at, and their families. The police officers assisting with the roadblock are also in the same position as the firefighters. They don't know anything about the radiation, and they don't have any protective clothing. So that's the people of Pripyat, the firefighters, and the police, which are being used to blockade the roads.
Well, I heard that, I don't know if we're going to get to it or not, but I heard that even with protective clothing on your body, like the right protective, that you wouldn't be able to stand it.
Oh yeah,
You'd still die.
We're gonna probably more so in part 2, but we're gonna definitely discuss the effects of radiation poisoning, and especially radiation that's that as strong as it was here.
Okay.
So, police same position. At 5 a.m., officials shut down reactor number 3. Right, finally. And then the next morning, they shut down 1 and 2.
Now, does that cause a meltdown, or is it just shutting it down so it doesn't
I'm
melt
assuming
down?
that they shut them down to avoid them going the same way as core number 4 did.
Okay.
That's my assumption anyway. So at 6, that was 5 o'clock, 6:35 a.m., by now, all the fires have been extinguished except for a blaze in the reactor core, which will burn for days.
Yeah.
And as you know, we'll find out later, that contributed to even worse because the heat and the stuff from it burning like that caused it to, it just made things worse. So now this is at 10 a.m. And I know this is just like a simplified timeline of events and stuff. We'll do a deeper dive in part 2. But
is this the same day or is it a different day?
This is the next day. So the third reactor is shut down on April 26th at 5 a.m., which is the same day as all of the events happened. And then the next morning, which is the 27th, they shut down 1 and 2.
Okay.
So also on the 27th at 10 a.m., helicopters begin dumping sand, clay, boron, lead, and dolomite into the burning core in an attempt to slow radioactive emissions. So they had helicopters flying right over the top of this smoke that is just billowing radiation and, bad news to dump the sand on there. And, they don't know which way the wind is going to shift or anything like that. So, I'm sure that they tried to stay, ahead of the smoke or whatever, but it can change direction. It's not safe.
Yeah, absolutely.
So everybody that is within the vicinity of this stuff is ending up with some kind of radiation. The closer you are, obviously, the worse it is. The less protection you have, the worse it is. But everybody is going to feel some kind of effects from that radiation.
Yeah.
At 2 p.m. on April 27th, 1986, after telling residents nothing about the disaster for 36 hours, Soviet officials finally began evacuating roughly 115,000 people from Pripyat.
How far away is it, like right in the city?
It's close. It's not right in the city.
So they would have been affected by the radiation.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
100% would have been affected. So after 36 hours, they finally begin to evacuate people from Pripyat as well as nearby towns and villages. Residents are informed it will be temporary and that they should pack only vital belongings and documents, plus some food. Soon after, however, an exclusion zone is set up around Chernobyl that prevents their return, so they never get to go back.
Yeah.
So they lose their homes.
Yeah, there's still stuff there.
Their jobs.
I've seen pictures and stuff of Pripyat, and it looks pretty freaky.
It's like a ghost town because they left things so quickly.
Yeah.
And they didn't go back, because it wasn't safe.
I don't think you can still come back. I think that you can go back for a little bit, but you can't live there.
Yeah, I'm not sure how things are there now. But yeah, no, it's all because in my opinion, it was handled incorrectly. But so they were all lied to. They lost their jobs, their homes, because the government was trying to cover their own asses, and they didn't want to.
Yeah, they didn't care how it affected the citizens.
So on the next day, April 28th, Swedish air monitors detect a large amount of radiation in the atmosphere. So this is in Sweden, which is traced back to the USSR. Soviet officials finally admit that there's been an accident, but they falsely state that the situation is under control. It's not under control, but that's what they say.
Yeah.
So Swedish Air is like, okay, hey, there's a large amount of radiation in the atmosphere right now. We're tracing it back to Chernobyl.
Yeah.
What's going on?
What's up with their reactor?
Yeah, the officials are like, nah, it's all good. We got it under control. Yeah. Just a little slip up. It's all good.
We just spilled a little.
April 29th in 86, spy satellite photos provide U.S. officials with their first glimpse of the devastation wrought by the Chernobyl disaster. So on the 29th, we know here in the U.S. what's going on.
About Fukushima as it was happening. Can you imagine just not knowing anything
and then afterwards,
4 days after, it's all like, oh yeah, by the way,
you've been exposed to all these people have been exposed to this much radiation or whatever.
Yeah.
So that was April 29th. At that point, we are given a glimpse of how bad
what it looks like from the sky.
The disaster actually was.
Yeah.
On May 1st, in 86, Soviet officials refused to cancel the May Day festivities in Kiev, even as radiation continues to be released unabated.
God.
So they're like, no,
oh my God.
It's all good. We can still have the May Day festivities. We're just going to gather in large crowds and soak up the radiation. But yeah, no, even in Kiev.
How far is Kiev from Pripyat?
I'm not sure.
Is it a good distance? I think it's I don't know.
It's hard for me to gauge distance.
Obviously,
we got.
Obviously, it's close enough to be effective.
Yeah.
I guess if they're detected it all the way in Sweden.
Yeah.
I mean, Kiev's a lot closer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's bad. That was on the 1st, so they refused to cancel everything. On the 4th of May, liquid nitrogen is pumped underneath the dead reactor in order to try to cool it. In other aspects of the cleanup, which involved, by the way, up to 800,000 workers, including bulldozing contaminated villages, right? So they wanted to make sure that they were being destroyed. Shooting contaminated pets and livestock and burying huge amounts of contaminated topsoil.
They just buried it?
Yeah, they buried it. They shot pets, any pets and livestock that were exposed.
Well, I understand that because they would have suffered through radiation poisoning. That's like a mercy kill, but
it's not just that. Is that if they have it on their skin or on their
I know how radiation spreads and stuff like that. But what isn't burying it just reinfecting the fucking soil?
The soil, yeah, it's probably part of why it still took as long as it did for stuff to start growing back.
Okay.
On May 6th, radioactive emissions drop sharply, possibly because the fire in the core has finally burned itself out. Meanwhile, Soviet officials finally closed schools in Kiev and advised residents to stay inside and to try not to eat leafy vegetables.
Yeah, because I think that captures radiation a little bit more than any other vegetables. Because they're up out of the ground instead of in it.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so it does. The the emissions from the radiation have dropped quite a bit once the core stopped burning. But I mean, damage is already done at that point.
Yeah.
So on May 8th, workers finished draining about 20,000 tons of radioactive water from the basement under the core. And that
where does that water go?
If you're draining it, I'm assuming just farther into the earth.
Oh God.
Yeah. May 9th, workers begin pouring concrete under the reactor, which is later encased in an enormous concrete and metal structure known as the sarcophagus. So they basically just took a giant concrete and metal dome and slapped it over the top of the reactor to try and...
I guess that could work.
Try and hold the...
I don't know how radiation passes through concrete metal.
Either.
So obviously, it doesn't come out of the reactors when the reactors are on. So
well, it obviously had to work at some point because it's just now we're just now starting to hear about some possible leaks from cracks in the dome.
From the bombings.
Yeah, from the bombings. But up to that point, that's. I mean, we haven't heard much more leakage of radiation come out of the Chernobyl area once they stopped.
That we know of. Obviously, they're not big on information over there.
Yeah. On May 14th, Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev speaks publicly about the incident for the first time, stating on state TV that the worst is behind us. Okay, Mr. Gorbachev. The worst is behind us,
Yeah.
I'm sorry for all the people that lost their lives or...
By the way, this shit's been leaking out for like...
Terrible, terrible deaths.
A lot of days, and you probably are all going to die.
So that was in May, right? Mm-hmm. In August 25th through the 29th, the International Atomic Energy Agency hosts a conference at which scientists blame the accident not just on human error and a subpar safety culture, but also on Soviet reactor design flaws. So they were saying basically that the International Atomic Energy Agency are saying not only are they incompetent and screwed up, or even that it was just an accident, but also because it was designed poorly. And the flaws in the design are also what caused the accident as well.
Oh, so they're saying like eventually it would have happened anyways.
Probably, yeah. December 15th in 2000.
Wow, big jump.
Huge jump. Unit 3, the last working reactor at Chernobyl, is shut down. Units 1 and 2 had been shut down in 96 and 91, respectively.
Oh, so there's still
there was still one. Yep, there's still one working reactor, which is Unit 3. As of December 15th, 2000, it was shut down. Okay. And then finally, pretty much the last big event in the timeline of Chernobyl, Gorbachev writes that the Chernobyl disaster, even more than my launch of perestroika, was perhaps the real cause of the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Wow.
So that's what he wrote about the disaster.
Just because
more
the death, or because it took so much money to cover up and clean up?
A little bit of everything. Just the pure disaster that it was.
Do you know what the
financially, economically,
perestroika is?
Let me look into that real quick.
Okay. Now, this all being said, though, like I've heard that nuclear power is the safest and cleanest power. And I know that we have a couple of reactors in Virginia. I think there's one up near Quantico or Fredericksburg. Mm-hmm. And I think there's one in the south somewhere.
Real quick, perestroika, Stroika, was a political movement for reform within the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. So it was basically...
Oh, so it's like 100% Gorbachev's fault. That's a Soviet Union fault.
Pretty much, yeah. But he was saying, more so even than that, Chernobyl caused this fall of the Soviet Union.
I'm pretty sure it was a space race.
No, I don't think so.
That's what I feel like it's attributed to. And Ronald Reagan was like, tear down this wall. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, I mean, with that timeline, I mean, it seemed like it was like the blind leading the blind.
Yeah. There were some unsung heroes, which I want to actually go into a lot more later on.
In part 2, yeah, we'll talk about them and their lives and how it affected them greatly, probably.
Obviously, the scientists that thought of the mixing of the boron and other elements into the sand to help,
Yeah. I know that they measured the radiation coming out.
Also, all of the miners and stuff that had to dig for the concrete and everything, all those workers.
like I said, I know a little bit about it because I've been told about it before, but I know that they didn't think it was as bad there because the tools to measure the radiation didn't go up high enough.
Yeah, as high as the
like
actual
they're
radiation
just like,
was.
oh, it's not so bad,
Yeah,
like
because
that.
it would only go up to a certain point because
Yeah.
it wouldn't be able to measure any more than that.
It was like 1,000 times higher than that.
Yeah.
And people like, and there's also like I said, well, and part two, like this part
If it-
one's just the timeline and everything.
I will tell you, if it had continued to be left unchecked, if they had continued trying to cover their own asses and they didn't have the people actually step forward to help resolve it, that radiation would have seeped all across Europe, and it would have affected a lot more people.
I'm pretty sure it would have reached us too.
Millions, yeah, millions and millions of people could have been killed as a result of that.
They also contribute Chernobyl disaster to the majority of cancer.
Yeah, well, yeah, and then we that's another big thing is like I was talking about earlier, even the ones that weren't directly affected with radiation poisoning that was strong enough to kill, in a couple of days or even hours, years later those effects would be felt in the forms of different types of cancer and stuff like that too. So
yeah, and like I said, in May we are going to be talking to a guy. He works around nuclear plants. I'm not 100% what his job title is, so when we talk to him, we will figure that out and do a wonderful interview with him about what he thinks went wrong and what could have absolutely prevented it. And we'll talk about Fukushima as well.
I don't know much about nuclear power plants or anything like that, but I'm pretty sure that I could have done a better job than the Soviet Union did at preventing that.
Just for the simple fact of, like, the safety coordinator should have been there. Like, that's, if you're doing a safety test, the safety coordinator has to be there.
Yeah.
Like, again, and they also should not have shut down the safety protocols, because they're there for a freaking reason. Because if the power goes out, the safety protocols will still be there, because they're built on a whole nother different system. And also them pulling the cores out and turning off the cooler system.
The rods.
Yeah, the rods. And then oh, well, we can't do it right now. Just leave them out. They'll be fine.
Yeah. Which I think is a big contributor as to why they jammed when it was time for them to actually do their job.
They're not made to come out like that.
Oh.
But yeah, absolutely, man. This is probably one of the scariest events that's ever happened in history. Just
because it could have been so much more catastrophic than even it was already. Like, a lot of the times, something will happen and it'll be like, yeah, that was bad. Yeah, it sucked, but it couldn't have been much worse. It was about as bad as it got. But with Chernobyl, it could have been so much worse.
I think besides the Spanish flu and the plagues and COVID, I think that maybe Chernobyl was one of the
mass extinction events.
Well, not a mass extinction events. I think it was one of the events that affected an absolute worldwide population just with cancer.
Goes along with what do we think is finally going to do it in the end, whether it's going to be some kind of super volcano or an asteroid or
I can already tell you what's going to end the world. It's going to be probably another virus or plague. There's plagues that in our history that have been so devastating to us that and tuberculosis, I mean, if there was like a super strand of tuberculosis has killed more people than any other disease combined. It is literally wiped out over
heart disease
over
the US right
billions of people. Heart disease comes from genetics and ways of life, and if you catch it early enough, you can prevent it. But with something like tuberculosis, before they got that vaccine, that was it. You got it, you're dead. Hope for the best.
TV.
But going back to Chernobyl, I think that I think a lot of things they did was wrong, and I do have to watch that show on HBO, Chernobyl.
Yeah,
I wonder if it's like
show
that.
on HBO Max is a really, really, really good representation for media as that goes. It's not a documentary; it's dramatization, but they get a lot right, and it's a really good show to watch.
Except for, I think I watched that trailer. They have like British accents.
Yeah,
I
well,
was like, you couldn't even fake the Russian accent.
or
Or at least got some Russians or Ukrainians to actually play in the movie.
right.
Because it was just like, I was like, why is this dude like? I think the guy that plays Professor Moriarty is in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, from Sherlock Holmes, with Robert Downey Jr. He tries talking. He just doesn't try. He just talks in a British accent, and I'm like, okay.
I also want to talk about one of the interesting things is after it became Pripyat itself became ghost town.
Mm-hmm.
How many different legends have popped up around that as well? Different types of ghost stories or
Yeah,
some mutant cryptid type deals.
and part 2 will be a lot longer than this in part 1. We just wanted to go through the timeline to let you guys know,
Kind of a setup.
like, yeah, set up basically what Chernobyl's going to come with, and just the devastation it's going to bring upon where it is in Pripyat and freaking Europe, and as far as America, just with all the shit that has happened, and it's just affected pop culture too. There's a lot of movies, Chernobyl Diaries, Chernobyl, the TV show, a lot of books, video games. I think like Stalker 2 that's getting ready to come out is based on Chernobyl. Singularity,
Yeah,
I think, and just different aspects of it. I believe like Fear. You remember the game Fear?
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's loosely based on the Chernobyl disaster because, like, I think in Fear 1 or 2, she's in a reactor, a nuclear reactor or something like that. So, our Patreon has officially launched. So, if you guys want to help us out and become a patron, we'd greatly appreciate it. There's 3 tiers. There's the $5 tier, which gives you bonus episodes and a $10 off coupon for our store, and then the second tier is $10, and that gives you the bonus episodes, the $10 off, and Patreon shout out, which includes a entrance into our yearly drawings, which will happen in August. You get a lot of cool stuff with the yearly drawings, like gift cards and merch and everything, free merch. So, and then our top tier, which is for the Dartarian acts who love us and want to help us out the most, is the $35 tier, and that comes with loyalty perks, like you get to enter twice in the drawings every year. You get the bonus episodes, you get everything that the other 2 tiers get, but you also get a special loyalty perk, which you get every 3 months. You get exclusive merch that's designed by Coda and sent to you every 3 months. So
It's very exciting.
Yeah, it is very exciting, and we are excited to tell you guys about it, and we're excited to bring you all this new stuff. We also, if you follow the link below, you can get to the Patreon link and the our store. We actually have a store now that has some few things in there, and we're also getting designs from Ashton Green, who is a cartoonist and
big thank you.
Designer. Yeah, big thank you to him. And he does a comic on Webtoons called Evil Call. So if you guys want to go check that out, I'd appreciate it. So give us a follow and everything else, and we appreciate you guys, and we'll see you next week for part 2 of Chernobyl.
Thanks for listening.